Welcome friends to Broken Narratives. I am your host Jay Firangi coming to you from the still city Hamilton, Ontario. As I mentioned in the last episode, today I will cover how COVID-19 vaccine production was different compared to traditional vaccines. I will discuss narrative on vaccine production by legacy news media before COVID-19 vaccines were given emergency use authorization. You will see reporting on how the FDA had neglected warning signs from investigators on vaccine manufacturing facilities. I will present a testimony from a whistleblower and reporting on conflict of interest of some of the vaccine approval committee members. You will also learn how billions of people were misled into taking this new unproven mRNA technology as a vaccine under the guise of the pandemic. The first clip is a compilation by Matt Orfella on a message that was parroted by news channels on TV to make people believe that everyone must get vaccinated.
No one's safe till everyone's safe.
No one is 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 safe.
Nobody's safe.
No one is safe.
Nobody is safe.
This is a post 9/11 axiom. Safer but not yet safe.
No one is safe. No one is safe. No one is safe. No one is safe from COVID-19 until everyone is safe.
If the whole world isn't safe, none of us are safe.
No one is safe.
No one is safe.
Nobody is safe.
Until we're all safe.
Health experts have been saying nobody is safe.
Nobody is safe until everybody is safe.
Nobody is safe.
The science is clear.
None of us are safe.
There is no safety.
No one is safe.
No one is safe.
No one is safe. No one is safe until everyone is safe. No one's safe.
Nobody is safe. Nobody's safe.
No one's safe.
We'll never be safe
until we're all safe.
We are never going to be safe.
99.5% of people are safe and will survive COVID-19.
The only positive thing out of this is we should be able to manufacture a lot of vaccines.
So that was an example of how mainstream news media repeats phrases, short phrases to manipulate people or nudge people into believing something or to take action that they want them to take. Now, next two clips, you will get an overview of how traditional vaccines work versus how mRNA vaccines work. And these two clips I have taken from a YouTube channel, Shy Show. I think it stands for Science Show. And the first clip is regarding traditional vaccines.
Two of the vaccines we have for COVID-19 have the distinction of being the first mRNA vaccines to see widespread use in humans. So how do they work? And how are they different from the litany of immunizations you probably got as a kid? Let's take a look. All vaccines do one basic thing. They imitate a disease-causing agent or pathogen with the goal of ratting it out to your immune system. Then your immune system knows what to do if the pathogen ever shows up. mRNA vaccines do that too, but they represent a departure from the way we've introduced pathogens in the past. Most of the time, we've used a bit of the real thing, like killed pathogens or living ones that have been weakened, or just pieces of them, or even substances that bacteria just make. In any case, these bits our immune system can spot are called antigens. Each antigen has a shape unique to a particular pathogen. When you get a vaccine, your immune system sees the antigen and sounds the alarm. That triggers the formation of memory cells that remember the bad guys, as well as antibodies that disable the pathogen if it tries to invade in the future.
So traditional vaccines uses dead virus or weakened virus or part of the virus as an antigen to make your body produce immune response. And when you get vaccinated with traditional vaccines and afterwards if you are infected with a live virus out in the world, your body can attack the virus because they have produced memory cells and antibodies, and you will be protected against, you will have immunity against that virus. Now let's see how mRNA technology, which was first time introduced during the pandemic to billions of people, how that works.
mRNA vaccines still accomplish that goal, but instead of pieces of pathogens or any other strategy we've used in the past, they contain messenger RNA, or mRNA for short. It works sort of like giving our cells a build-your-own antigen kit instead of the actual antigen. So, how do you program a cell to make an antigen? Well, the simple version is you just borrow the machinery it's already using. See, most every cell contains a complete copy of our genome, the sum total of instructions it takes to make us, written in DNA. That information gets translated into proteins. That's what an mRNA vaccine is. Instead of an antigen, they contain the mRNA template to build an antigen. In the case of our COVID-19 vaccines, the message codes for an antigen called the spike protein. These spikes stick out of the virus, which uses them like a key to unlock and infect people's cells. When the shots go into people's upper arms, the mRNA molecules inside make their way into cells and to ribosomes, which are more than happy to do their job and translate the message. Our cells display the finished spikes on their surface. Our immune system spots them and starts taking action. From there, it's thought that things work pretty much the same as more traditional vaccines. The immune system makes memory cells and antibodies, and once those defenses have kicked all the way in, boom, you're ready to fight off the real deal.
So instead of using dead virus or weakened virus or part of the virus, mRNA technology makes your body to produce antigen, and then those antigens are recognized by your body to produce antibodies and memory cells. That's how it works. So that was a departure from traditional vaccines. Now let's look at a vaccine timeline, how vaccines are traditionally approved by FDA, Food and Drug Administration in US, how long it takes and what are the steps that are involved. And next two clips I have taken from a podcast by Peter Attia, Dr. Peter Attia, his podcast The Drive, and you will hear Dr. Paul Offit, who is inventor of rotavirus vaccine, and they will discuss. In this first clip we will hear about a preclinical trial and first and second phase of clinical trials for vaccines.
So can you explain to people what a phase 1 vaccine trial aims to accomplish and what a typical size of that trial might look like?
If you're trying to make a vaccine, you start in so-called preclinical studies, meaning studies done before you get to humans. And hopefully you'll have an animal model to study the disease. In the case of rotavirus, it was mice. If we inoculated baby mice with rotavirus, they got sick. Okay, great. So now we have a way to study this infection. Then you have your idea for how you want to make your vaccine. You give your vaccine, you then challenge the animal with the virus, and hopefully you can protect the animal from disease. And more importantly, you can frankly literally dissect out that part of the immune response that's associated with protection against challenge. So those preclinical studies are called proof of concept studies. So now you have your way of making a vaccine. Then you go to phase 1, which are usually about 20 to 100 people. Now you have your idea for how you want to make it, but you don't really know the dose. So you give a variety of different doses to these 20 to 100 people to see whether or not you can safely induce an immune response that you think is going to be protective based on your animal model work. Now you have a dose and a strategy.
What's the typical length of time?
I think probably it's fair to say 10 years, 15 years.
So now let's go to phase 2. You've established a dose, potentially a frequency. What do you do in phase 2, and roughly how many people do you do this with?
So phase 2 is typically hundreds of people. Now you've got your vaccine, you've got your dose, and you just want to make sure that it's consistently induces an immune response that you think is protective and that it's at least safe and that it doesn't cause a relatively common serious side effect. That's phase 2.
And some more background on Dr. Paul Offit. He's an American pediatrician specializing in infectious diseases, vaccines, immunology, and virology. He is the co-inventor of rotavirus vaccine, and Offit is a member of the Food and Drug Administration Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee. And I think he was on advisory committee for vaccine approval for COVID-19 as well. And in this second clip, you will hear regarding phase 3 trial and how long usually it takes, like from preclinical phase to phase 3, and to get a FDA approval for vaccine.
So now we go to phase 3, and what does that look like?
This is the definitive trial. This is the trial that you're going to use to submit information to the FDA Food and Drug Administration, hopefully for licensure. These are tens of thousands of people. In the case of our rotavirus vaccine, it was 70,000 babies. 35,000 got the vaccine, 35,000 got placebo, which is just essentially the vaccine except no active ingredient, just the, frankly, sugar solution in which the vaccine virus was suspended. And then you just send people out into the real world. I mean, rotavirus is a common infection. It's the rare child who gets stage 5 without being infected. And then you just see whether or not children who got the vaccine were less likely to get rotavirus, or if they got it, that they were less likely to get it severely. And hopefully we had sera on all those children, meaning we looked at the antibodies on all those children. Hopefully that would provide a clear immunological correlative protection, which it didn't. We knew that the vaccine worked, we knew that it was safe, and so we could submit it for licensure to the FDA. But as you go along, things are much more expensive. You go from sort of millions to tens of millions to hundreds and hundreds of millions, and then you mass produce the vaccine after you've found out that it works.
And as a general rule, the process we just described, going from a preclinical model in animals to the completion of a phase 3 trial with the FDA approval of an agent, here's the rule of thumb I use. Please correct me on the vaccine side. I generally say that's 20 years and $1 billion. And that's usually on the drug side. Is it about the same on the vaccine side?
Yes, 15 to 20 years with at least $1 billion. That's right.
So it usually takes 15 to 20 years and $1 billion to get the vaccine from preclinical trials to FDA approval. And COVID-19 vaccines were all developed during the pandemic under a year. So you can see that there is a very big difference in terms of timeline. And now next clip is of Dr. Anthony Fauci, and this is from November 2019. And I just want to repeat the same point. This was Dr. Anthony Fauci in November 2019 when he attended a conference making influenza history, the quest for a universal vaccine. And where they were discussing developing a influenza vaccine, universal influenza vaccine. And let's see what he was saying regarding if we want to develop a new technology to develop a vaccine, how long it would take.
The critical challenge, and it relates to one of the things that Peggy said, is that in order to make the transition from getting out of the tried and true egg growing, which we know gives us results that can be, beneficial. I mean, we've done well with that, to something that has to be much better. You have to prove that this works, and then you've got to go through all of the clinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3, and then show that this particular product is going to be good over a period of years. That alone, if it works perfectly, is going to take a decade.
So according to Dr. Anthony Fauci, at least a decade. Fastest vaccine that was developed before COVID-19 vaccines was I think mumps vaccine. It was developed was approved in a 4 years time period. Now let's talk about COVID-19 vaccines, and I have another clip of Dr. Peter Hotez. He was also on news channels frequently during the pandemic. He must have given hundreds and hundreds of interviews during the pandemic on different issues related to pandemic. And this clip I have taken from a YouTube channel. And you will hear Dan Cohen. He's an independent journalist, and he did a expose on Dr. Peter Hotez. And you will listen his credentials and what he was saying regarding emergency use authorization and some issues with coronavirus vaccines that he had tried to develop before COVID-19 pandemic.
Peter Hotez has built a career in the nexus of pharmaceutical giants, billionaire foundations, and the U.S. government. In the COVID era, he has become an evangelist for the emergent biomedical security regime, attacking anyone who deviates from its diktats.
We have to recognize that anti-vaccine activism, which I actually call anti-science aggression,
anti-science, anti-vaccine aggression, anti-science is now a leading cause of death. It's killing more Americans than gun violence, nuclear proliferation, or cyber attacks.
While Peter Hotez demands censorship and international action against foreign countries, he has contradicted himself at virtually every turn throughout the COVID era. In the first year, when Trump was still president, Hotez warned about the dangers of rushing vaccines under emergency use authorization.
I don't think EUAs have a place for vaccines. We've never done an emergency use authorization for a major vaccine release to the public. What does that mean? We know it's a lesser quality review. What's the FDA going to do to ensure public safety?
While Hotez may have had political motivations to cast doubt on the coronavirus products, he had good reason to be concerned. In March 2020, Hotez gave congressional testimony to warn about the dangers of coronavirus vaccines.
One of the things that we're not hearing a lot about is the unique potential safety problem of coronavirus vaccine. With certain types of respiratory virus vaccines, you get immunized, and then when you get actually exposed to the virus, you get this kind of paradoxical immune enhancement phenomenon. We started developing coronavirus vaccines, and our colleagues, we noticed in laboratory animals that they started to show some of the same immune pathology that resembled what had happened 50 years earlier. So we said, oh my God, this is going to be problematic.
So before COVID-19 vaccines were given emergency use authorization, he was saying that it's a lesser quality review, emergency use authorization, and we have never done it before. And as he discussed that when he and his colleagues tried to develop a vaccine for coronavirus, they had issues, and immune enhancement was happening in the animal models, and that was his scientific statement in front of Congress when he was testifying. And now let's see what were some politicians were saying regarding vaccines before they were given approval. And this is a compilation as well.
I think it's going to be a very skeptical American public about taking the vaccine, and they should be.
If and when the vaccine comes, and it's not likely to go through all the tests that needs to be and the trials that are needed to be done.
Let's just say there's a vaccine that is approved and even distributed before the election. Would you get it?
Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us.
When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay.
Is the vaccine safe? Frankly, I'm not going to trust the federal government's opinion. And I wouldn't recommend to New Yorkers based on the federal government's opinion.
And the question of whether it's real when it's there, that requires enormous transparency.
I don't trust the president, and I don't trust the FDA.
If Donald Trump can't give answers and the administration can't give answers to these three questions, the American people should not have confidence.
You're going to say to the American people now, here's a vaccine, it was new, it was done quickly, but trust this federal administration and their health administration that it's safe.
How confident are you in the approval process of the FDA right now?
How confident am I? I'm not that confident.
Yes, I would be hesitant, but I'm going to ask a lot of questions.
You're going to need someone other than this FDA and this CDC saying it's safe.
You've got to make all of it available to other experts across the nation so they can look and see. So there's consensus, this is a safe vaccine.
So they were not confident. They were all saying that they don't trust FDA and Trump administration's recommendation, and they wouldn't trust the vaccine. But you will see how they switch to 180, and they had started pushing vaccines, not just pushing vaccines, but mandating vaccines, as you know. And now let's see some reporting on how FDA handled when some investigators raised concerns and raised alarm that how vaccine manufacturing facilities were being handled. And this next two clips are from PBS, and you will here Catherine Eben, she's from Vanity Fair, and also Hari Srinivasan, that's the anchor of PBS News, and you will hear their discussion on this matter.
While there's been much attention given to the approval for a COVID-19 vaccine, little attention has been given to how the facilities where many vaccines are manufactured are being regulated. A recent investigation in Vanity Fair magazine features a former FDA inspector turned whistleblower who says that the FDA is not doing its job and downgraded his findings to escape regulatory enforcement. The article also cites documents and letters charging the plants lack proper FDA oversight. The FDA responded that medical products are made, quote, in compliance with good manufacturing practice. I recently spoke with the Vanity Fair article's reporter, contributing editor Catherine Eben, who is also the author of the book Bottle of Lies, the inside story of the generic drug boom. Who checks all these plants?
The FDA is responsible for inspecting the manufacturing conditions inside any plant that is making drugs that go to U.S. patients. They have an elite unit of highly trained investigators called Team Biologics, but surprisingly, it's only 14 people who are required to investigate conditions in 280 biologic plants that sell drugs and biologic products into the U.S. So this is our investigation revealed it's a demoralized unit claiming of poor supervision from inexperienced supervisors. There are personnel complaints inside that unit. This whistleblower alleged that he was not empowered to do his job. He felt that it threatened the safety of the American public.
So only 14 people to investigate 280 facilities that produce vaccines and other biological products that are given to Americans. And this second clip gives more details on how FDA was downgrading warning signals, what kind of warning signals they were seeing, the investigators were seeing at those facilities, and FDA did not take any actions when that warning signs were brought into their knowledge.
An investigator has to classify their findings in any plant. Those can be no action indicated, which means they didn't find any problems. Voluntary action indicated, which means the plant should take some steps to make changes, or official action indicated, which is the most serious. One of the complaints inside Team Biologics is that investigators are going in, finding conditions that they classified as official action indicated, which means urgent. The plant needs to make urgent changes because there are real hazards there, and that bureaucrats back at FDA headquarters were downgrading those recommended classifications.
So does the FDA have any plans to increase the size of the team that goes and inspects the plants, considering what you're talking about, which is that we are heading into an era where there are going to be multiple vaccines that are going to have to be manufactured at an enormous scale to make sure that everybody who needs it gets it in the United States?
Right. I'm not aware of any plans that they have to expand that unit, upgrade their capacities, and in fact, it's sort of worse than that, because if the COVID vaccines get approved through what's called an emergency use authorization, it's not even clear that the FDA is going to require full inspections of these plants. Now, full inspections produce publicly available records. And what we learned from our reporting is that so far there's only site visits happening and memos being written to file about conditions in these COVID-19 vaccine plants. They're not even producing, fully public documentation.
So this is what was going on regarding vaccine manufacturing facilities. As you heard, FDA was downgrading the warning signs, and they were not even going to produce full report if the vaccines were given emergency use authorization, which was done. And now let's see clip. This next clip is from BMJ, the BMJ British Medical Journal, where they had interviewed a whistleblower, Brooke Jackson. She has more than or close to 20 years of experience in clinical trials, and she was hired in I think September 2020 by one of the Pfizer's subcontractors to on a vaccine trial. And the things she saw and she brought the attention to her supervisors were also neglected. And let's hear about that from this next clip.
My name is Brooke Jackson. I was fired in September of 2020 for being a whistleblower. I was working on Pfizer's phase 3 pivotal trial on their COVID-19 vaccine. At one point when I was going through emails, there were emails from ICON begging Ventavia to follow up on severe adverse events that had been reported. There were several emails about mislabeled specimens, blood specimens, and the nasal swabs. There were specimens that were labeled with another participant's information. It was a nightmare. I walked into an area where the vaccines were refrigerated, or frozen rather. And when I walked in, I saw a biohazard bag. The plastic biohazard bag contained used needles, and I realized how unorganized and sloppy Ventavia was handling everything. In that same room where they kept the vaccine was just left out, and the boxes that the vaccine came in, the containers, they had written the subject information on these containers. So right there, me working on the study, it unblinded me to the randomization of these patients. I made note of that. I took pictures just to document what I'd seen to show my managers.
And she was fired within 2 weeks. And she's not the only one who had come out during the pandemic to blow the whistle on these trials, but there were more vaccine trial participants as well who had come out and blow the whistle on what was going on during those trials. Now let's see how before the vaccines, mRNA technology vaccines were approved. They were approved based on that mRNA is very volatile molecule. It doesn't last long in room temperature. It degrades, and so they were supposed to be stored in a very low temperature, minus 90 degrees Celsius. But once they were given approval, within 2 weeks for Pfizer, that was reversed, and then they were allowed to be stored in less higher temperatures, less lower temperatures. And let's hear about that from CNBC.
The FDA is saying that it's allowing Pfizer's vaccine to be shipped and stored for up to 2 weeks at more normal freezer temperatures. That's after Pfizer submitted data just 6 days ago showing that it could be stable at those more normal pharmaceutical freezer temperatures. This, of course, should allow for more flexibility in the transportation and storage of this vaccine when, for longer periods, it needs to be stored at minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit. So 2 weeks at more normal freezer temperatures for the Pfizer vaccine, and a real quick turnaround on this decision from the FDA, less than a week, should make things easier for getting this vaccine around the country and the world.
And there were millions of dollars were spent by state and federal government to buy new freezers that would store vaccine at a much more lower temperature, minus 90 degrees Celsius. And I have one more clip from The Drive, Dr. Peter Attia's podcast, and again Dr. Paul Offit will what he was discussing in November 2020 regarding mRNA and how mRNA breaks down very easily in a normal temperature, room temperature.
Given how unstable RNA could be, when you take a single strand of messenger RNA and deliver it, what allows it, I mean, this might sound like a silly sort of technical question, what allows it to make its way into our cells, into the cytoplasm, head over to the ribosome, and then get translated ultimately into protein?
So anybody who works with messenger RNA in a laboratory stores messenger RNA at minus 70 degrees centigrade or in liquid nitrogen because, as you say, it's an incredibly labile molecule. It breaks down within moments, frankly. So to get around that problem, these vaccines, the messenger RNA vaccines, have to be encapsulated in a complex lipid delivering system which stabilizes them to some extent. The Moderna has been able to figure out a way to both store and ship and store at minus 20 degrees, which is just freezer temperature. But Pfizer, no, they're going to ship and store at minus 70, minus 80, this sort of ultra cold chain, which we've never done in this country, which I think will be a challenge.
Yeah, so that was another challenge, but they changed it within 2 weeks, within 1 week, and they were given permission to store those vaccines at minus 20 degrees Celsius. And what changed, like what happened, the details were never given from any of the news channels. And let's continue. And the next clip is from October 2020, and you will hear Stefan Orlik, who is a board member of Bayer Agriculture, I think Bayer AG, and head of the pharmaceutical division headquartered in Berlin, Germany. And this is where he was speaking at an event, World Health Summit, I think, World Health Summit 2021. And this is very short clip and what he had to say regarding mRNA technology.
I always like to say, if we had surveyed 2 years ago in the public, would you be willing to take a gene or cell therapy and inject it into your body, we would have probably had a 95% refusal rate. I think this pandemic has also opened many people's eyes to innovation in the way that was maybe not possible before.
Yes, so according to him, if before the pandemic people were surveyed and asked about mRNA technology, would they take it because it's a gene therapy, as he said, like 95% of people would not take it, but they led people, billions of people, to believe that this is a vaccine, and people took it. Some people took it because of they believed in it. Many maybe for they want to keep their job or go out and enjoy, go to restaurants, movies, and things like that. But this was done, and people were misled. And if this was not enough, I have one more clip, and this is from March 2022. You will hear the head of the Pfizer, Albert Bourla himself, and when he was asked in an interview regarding why they went with mRNA technology, what was the thinking behind it, and let's listen to his reply, that he was shocked, and he was not for it. He was not for mRNA technology because they did not have any experience with working with mRNA technology before this.
I want to get a little into the weeds here and the mRNA technology. When you and your colleagues were trying to decide which route to go down, the traditional vaccine route or the mRNA route, you write that it was, quote, most counterintuitive to go the mRNA route, and yet you went that route. Explain why.
It was counterintuitive because Pfizer was mastering, or let's say we had very good experience and expertise with multiple technologies that could give a vaccine. Adenoviruses, that some of the other vaccines are. We were very good in doing that. Protein vaccines, we were very good in doing that, and plus many other technologies. mRNA was the technology that we had less experience, only 2 years working on this. And actually, mRNA was a technology that never delivered a single product until that day. Not vaccine, not any other medicine. So it was very counterintuitive, and I was surprised when they suggested to me that this is the way to go.
So that was CEO Albert Bourla, Pfizer CEO, and as you heard that it was counterintuitive for him, and he was surprised when his team suggested that they will go with mRNA technology because they had only 2 years of experience working with that. But yeah, this technology was pushed on people under the guise of the pandemic. And now I want to go through some articles. And the first one here is from, this one here, right here from CNN. Even without a COVID-19 vaccine, there is reason for hope. Opinion by William Haseltine. This was published in July 2020. And I will just give some details here. William Haseltine, PhD, is chair and president of the global health think tank Access Health International. And some details here. One thing we do know is that some of the vaccines currently being tested in humans are already causing serious side effects. The side effects are likely a result of the powerful ingredient added to the vaccine to help inflame the body's immune system. These ingredients, called adjuvants, help vaccine work better, but if they can land the young and healthy patients in the clinical trial in the hospital because of high fever and fainting, imagine what they might do to those already ill and with secondary conditions, or to those who are older. So this was his opinion, guy who has a PhD. And let's see some more articles here. This is again from the BMJ. COVID-19, how independent were the US and British Vaccine Advisory Committee? And an investigation by the BMJ has found that some of these experts have significant industry ties that government agencies do not always disclose. Both the FDA and the UK government require panelists to disclose conflict only from the previous 12 months, which can miss significant financial payments that occurred in recent years. We also found examples where panelists disclose to committees their grants, patents, and other industry relationships in their publication, but it seems that the committees did not find these matters worth making public, and they remained undisclosed until now. And they have some examples here. In the case of the UK's JCVI, the chair of the COVID-19 meeting in Wee Shan Lim, a professor at the Nottingham Biomedical Research Centre, who JCVI says has no registered conflict of interest. The same document, however, further states that Lim's institute has received unrestricted investigation-initiated research funding from Pfizer. And they have more examples from UK and US as well. And here is an article from Israel National News, and it just says it out loud. This is not a vaccine. The Israeli people haven't been given information required for a sufficient risk-benefit analysis in this extraordinary endeavor. Published in January 2021. In effect, Bibi has signed up his people, all 7 million citizens aged 12 and over, without our informed consent, to become the first country in its entirety to do human testing on a technology which has been for many decades attempted and failed in the laboratory. The Israeli people have not been given the information required to make sufficient risk-benefit analysis in this extraordinary endeavor. In fact, they have been given little information at all that includes complete opacity of data on the unfolding outcomes of adverse reactions currently taking place. It is an experimental and novel technology by definition of the FDA, as the component used as treatment to affect a body's function. It is in fact a medical device, a physical device that comes in molecular size packages. Erroneously referring to this intervention as a vaccine exploits the public's ingrained trust of the vaccination program to solicit knee-jerk response and action. And here is one more article. This is from King Phi. Yes, the CDC changed its definition of vaccine to be more transparent. So during the pandemic, they had changed the definition of vaccine. Yes, the CDC changed its definition of vaccine from a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease, protecting the person from the disease, to preparation that used to stimulate the body's immune response against a disease. The Public Health Agency also changed its definition of vaccination. And here is that the latest CDC definition is absent the word immunity and just focuses on stimulation of body's immune response. The CDC also changed its wording for the definition of vaccination from the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce immunity to a specific disease in 2018 to the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce protection from a specific disease. The key difference here are again the absence of the word immunity in the latest definition and the change to protection instead. So why does it matter? And here is from CDC's website, vaccines and immunization and definition of terms. The first term is immunity, protection from an infectious disease. If you are immune to a disease, you can be exposed to it without becoming infected. And as you know, COVID-19 vaccines, even if you get it, you can get the disease as well. You can still be infected with the virus. So this was happening. So that is why they had changed the definition in the middle of the pandemic. But if you read in this article, like they try to explain it away, like because people were claiming that it is not 100% protective, and there were breakthrough cases. So to correct that misinformation, they had changed the definition. But that's not the point. Like in traditional vaccines, if you get a polio vaccine or any other vaccine, you don't get the disease. You can't get infected. And that's what it means to have an immunity against the virus, as from the CDC's website itself. But they changed the definition during the pandemic, and most people did not know regarding that. Here is another article from NPR regarding trials. Long-term studies of COVID-19 vaccines hurt by placebo recipient getting immunized. Tens of thousands of people who volunteered to be in studies of the Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines are still participating in follow-up research. But some key questions won't be easily answered, because many people who had been in the placebo group have now opted to take the vaccine. So, and some more details here. Dr. Stephen Goodman, a clinical trial specialist at Stanford University, says losing those control groups makes it more difficult to answer some important questions about COVID-19 vaccines. We don't know how long protection lasts, he says. We don't know efficacy against variants, for which we definitely need a good control arm, and we also don't know if there are any differences in any of these parameters by age or race or infirmity. I don't know that word, but yes, many people who were taking part in these clinical trials had opted to take the vaccine. So we did not have a control group to compare the outcomes. And here is the last article, and let me just refresh it. FDA asked federal judge to grant it until the year 2076 to fully release Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine data. The federal government shields Pfizer from liability, gives it billions of dollars, makes Americans take its products, but won't let you see the data supporting its safety efficacy. Who does the government work for? And published in November 2020 by Aaron Siri. And let me just read this last two paragraphs here. The FDA asked the judge to let it produce the 329,000 pages of documents Pfizer provided to the FDA to license its vaccine at the rate of 500 pages per month, which means its production would now be completed earlier than 2076. The FDA's promise of transparency is, to put it mildly, a pile of illusions. It took FDA precisely 108 days from when Pfizer started producing the records for licensure to when the FDA licensed the Pfizer vaccines. Taking the FDA, where is it? Where was I? All right, complete the review. Pfizer vaccine was safe and effective for while it can conduct that intense review of Pfizer's document in 108 days. It now asks for over 20,000 days to make these documents available to the public. So this was in November 2021, but later Aaron Siri, he had filed a lawsuit against FDA, and later they had started releasing Pfizer trial data as well. But this is what going on. They had given them authorization, but they were not going to release all the documents. They were going to release like 20,000 pages every month or so. So this is the kind of things were going on regarding vaccine production. And I have a last clip, and this is of Dr. Peter Hotez. As you heard him previously, what he was saying regarding emergency use authorization, that it is not perfect and we had never done it, and he had issues with developing coronavirus vaccines. And once the vaccines were given emergency use authorization, now what he was saying regarding that, let's see.
Once the FDA had given emergency use authorization, Hotez reversed his public stance.
So what's your reaction to this approval out of this second vaccine?
No, it's fantastic. The emergency use authorization closely approximates the full approval process, so there's nothing really rushed. Any vaccine released by emergency use authorization by the FDA is an outstanding vaccine. Take whatever vaccine is really offered to you.
Hotez said that once enough people were injected with 2 doses, viral transmission would stop and other measures would no longer be necessary.
News is good. It's saying even after 6 months, it still looks like it's really strong and durable. So this is going to be a long-lasting vaccine. A single dose is not very effective, but 2 doses, fully vaccinated people are. A week or 2 after the second dose, the masks can start to come off. And guess what? You can have everything you've asked for in terms of not requiring social distancing and masks.
So these were the kind of things that they were promising at the beginning when the vaccines were given approval, that you won't have to wear mask and you won't catch the disease or you won't spread the disease. And we all know what happened with that, but I will discuss that in next episode regarding vaccine efficacy. So to summarize that, there were issues with production of these vaccines from the beginning, especially mRNA, which was never used before. There were never any products brought to market, and there were issues with facilities, very few investigators, and they found warning signs that the FDA had neglected. Whistleblowers had come out, and trial participants also had testified later in interviews that there were wrongdoings, that there were problems with the trials, and this was a new technology, and there were safety concerns as well. You heard not just from these trials, but also trials to develop coronavirus vaccine previously. And these vaccines were produced in record time. Usually it takes at least a decade, but these were produced all within a year. So these were the issues with the vaccine productions. I hope you learned few new things and enjoyed the episode. I hope you also check out the show notes if you want to verify something. Please share the episode. Please share the show with others and spread the word. Thank you very much for watching Broken Narratives. I am your host Jay Firangi, coming to you from the Still City, Hamilton, Ontario, and I will see you in the next episode.